Hi, thanks for joining me. So, apple season has begun on our homestead. Dun dun dun! It's a good thing, but it's also a lot of work. We have a few apple trees, to say the least, and we keep finding more. But even though the first of the apples are kind of small this year, that's okay. I still have lots of ways to preserve them, and the one I'm going to start with is dehydrating. This is really easy. It takes a minimum of special equipment, and my son in particular really loves them. So I'm going to show you a couple of different ways to do this depending upon what you already have on hand. A lot of you may have one of these. It's an apple core slicer. I don't recommend you use this. First of all, I have yet to find one that cuts through our apples or oddly shaped apples. If you're growing them yourself, maybe it works better on store-bought apples that tend to be more one size, maybe softer too. But the bigger reason is it's going to give you really big slices. We don't want big slices. We want thinner slices. We want the apple slices to dry fairly quickly so that they retain more of their nutrients, and we know they're good and dry, and they're going to last at least a year in the pantry. You might also have an apple core like this. Now these are designed to just line up with the core of the apple. You push on it rather hard, you pull it out, the core is in there, and you pull that out and throw it in your compost bin or make jelly out of it or whatever. I don't find that this works really well on my apples. Again, maybe my apples are kind of tough. It's really great for pitting plums, however. But if you have one of these and it works with your apples, feel free to go ahead and do that. And then you're just going to slice them with a knife, as I'll show you in a few minutes. My ideal tool for this is an apple peeler corer. Now, this is a Victorio. I also have a Pampered Chef. They both work really great. I'll put links in the description. This does a great job if you want it peeled and cored and sliced all at one time. It makes the job really fast. And it's pretty important if you have a large amount of apples to do. But let's just assume you don't have any of those tools. What do? Well, before I had those special tools, I just used a knife. Let me show you how. There are lots of ways you can do this, but this is just how I usually do it. I like to look for the blossom end. That is literally the part of the apple where the flower blossom used to be, not the stem end, the opposite end. And I just chop it off. And typically I will just toss that into the compost, but you could keep it if you wish. And then I just make rather thin slices. At some point I tend to like to turn it around and get that other end. And you know, these are not going to be perfect slices because you're doing it by hand, and that's fine. Now, this is what you end up with. And you can see this is the core, this right here. So you can either leave those in and just dehydrate these this way, and that's perfectly fine. Lots of people do that. Or if your kids complain that the core is icky, like mine do, you can cut that out with your knife. So, let's see here. I just make a square. I am not going for beauty, I am going for function. Okay, and that just pops out. And then I can compost the core, and the rest of the apple is ready to go. Some pieces you may find that you don't have as much of the core, and you can just leave those as is. By the way, you'll notice that I did not peel these apples. That is completely a personal preference. If you like your apples peeled before they're dried, feel free to go ahead and do that. I used to do that, and then I learned that a lot of the nutrition is in the peel, and since our apples are organic anyway, I just leave them on. If you do decide to leave the core in, you want to make sure that you pop you want to pop the seeds out like that. All right, now let me show you how to use the apple peeler corer. So with an apple peeler corer, you're going to take that same blossom end and you're going to put it into the prongs and push it in as much as you can. I, again, am not going to peel, so I've got this pushed back. If you wanted it peeled, it has a little lever here that when you start turning the handle, that's going to start peeling the apple. But again, I'm going to put that back there so that it's not peeling. Here we go. And the apple pulls off, and now you can see, hopefully, that the core is completely gone and it's like cut accordion style. We can take the core off. I think I'm going to save my scraps today for making vinegar. Maybe that will be the next video, or one coming up soon. And then to make individual rings, I just make one slice like this. Now I've got individual rings. Now I'm using an electric dehydrator, so I'm just taking the slices as I make them and putting them on the dehydrator trays. They can touch, but you only want one layer per tray. Now you might notice that some of these are already starting to get pretty brown, and that's just happens naturally due to the air and how it reacts with the apple. I don't usually do anything about that. It doesn't bother us. But if it bothers you, you can dip the fruit in lemon water. And that's going to help prevent the browning. And some people say that it helps preserve some of the nutrients as well. I don't know. I haven't seen good scientific evidence for that. So I'm going to finish doing this, and then I'm going to give you an idea for if you don't have an electric dehydrator. Once your trays are full, put the lid on the dehydrator. I have my trusty Nescos here. Whatever dehydrator you use, if it's electric, definitely should have a temperature control. If it doesn't, I wouldn't use it. So all fruit should be dried at 135 degrees Fahrenheit or 58 degrees Celsius. So now I can just plug this in and let it go. But what do you do if you don't have an electric food dehydrator? You may certainly do the old-fashioned method where you take a clean white sheet or something similar, lay it down on the grass, and put your apple slices on it. My great-granny used to do it that way. My dad told tales of that. But if you don't have hot, dry conditions, if it's humid, if it's wet, obviously that's not going to work very well. But all of us usually have a stove, right? So what you can do is take a regular rimmed baking tray and put a cooling rack on it. It has just little legs. Set it right in there and then put your apple slices on the tray. Now if you have a warming drawer in your oven, use that. Just stick this into the warming drawer until the apples are dry. If you don't have that, turn your oven to its very lowest setting, pop these in there, and try, if you can, to leave the door ajar. Some people put a wooden spoon in there or something. The idea is to keep the temperature as close to 135 degrees as possible, because higher temperatures are going to cook the apple. That's not what we're after. We just want to draw the moisture out. So these apples have been in the dehydrator only for a few hours. I started this in the morning and it's now, like 4:30 in the afternoon. But I see that some of them are ready to come out. One important thing to note is that I did rotate the trays once. So the tray that was on the top went to the bottom and so on and so forth. And you could do that once, maybe twice a day until your apples are ready. A lot of people are going to ask, how long will it take for my apples to dry? But nobody can tell you that. There are just too many variables. The variety of apple you use, how fresh it is, and the conditions in your home, how humid it is, how hot it is, how accurate accurate the temperature gauge on your dehydrator are. All those things come into play. I obviously have a lot of trays going. I have my Nescos, what I consider at full capacity, so it's going to take longer for some than others. So it's important to know how to check your dehydrated apples or other foods that you're doing to make sure they're fully dry. And the way you do that is to tear it open a little bit and you look for any signs of moisture coming out. This has absolutely no signs of moisture coming out. It is perfectly dry. So I'm going to put it in this jar. I recommend a glass jar with a metal lid. Plastic allows air and moisture to come in, and your food isn't going to last as long. So I use, like, this is an old olive jar with a metal lid, or you can just use a canning jar with, I often use a used canning lid and ring. Once you have your dried apples in a jar, you want to let them cool off a little bit before you put on that metal lid. You don't want condensation to build up in the jar. Then you're going to just stick this jar in a cool, dark location like your pantry, and the food should be good for at least a year, maybe a little bit longer. Thanks for joining me, and if you have any questions at all, please leave a comment. I will answer. And please like and subscribe, and I hope to see you here again next time. Bye.